Joining us, professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan. Sorry, my nose is tickling. University of Michigan's Ford School of Public Policy and politics reporter at Semaphore, Dave Weigel. Gentlemen, really good to have you. Thank you for being here. Desolate, that's tough stuff, Justin. I mean, we talk about two separate tracks here. We talk about the stock market, which is open to about half of Americans are involved in it, whether through retirement or through their own personal accounts. And the other half of Americans are not enjoying it at all. So when we're talking about the economy, is there any upside for them?
Yeah, Katie, really good point. Look, the stakes here really matter. These are real people sitting around their kitchen tables trying to make ends meet. Talk about the economy is never abstract. It's about those people. Let me connect that back to the markets, because I think a lot of viewers would find it weird that at a moment like this, a moment where some families in the Middle East, some families with kids in the military are feeling real fear, very deep, important human emotions. Why is it we're talking about financial markets? And it's because the financial markets are doing a good job of tracking the ups and downs of what's going on in the Middle East. And so when the markets are down, yes, that's some rich guy who's got a little bit less money, but really that's a lot of people betting that the future profitability and productivity of the American economy will be weaker. And so we don't really have as good of an indicator of the ups and downs of how things are going. And what we've seen time and again is every time the president moves towards de-escalation, the stock market rises. Every time he escalates, it falls. That's the stock market screaming out, our economic prospects are better, we believe more in them, if the president de-escalates rather than pushing into the worst of his excesses.
Let me put up some numbers today. A majority of Americans say their household finances have already taken a hit. That's 55%. 1 in 5 of those people said their finances were impacted a great deal. Many Americans concerned about being able to afford gas. That's 45% of U.S. adults who are either extremely or very worried. Trump's approval, Dave, on the economy is not good. 29% approve of the economy, 62% disapprove. Is that an indicator that the president has not sold his policies, has not sold his moves, has not sold this war to Americans? They don't see what he's doing in the White House as worth it?
Well, that was true even before the war started. Every Trump number on the economy, really since the month after inauguration, has compared unfavorably to his first term. Republicans did pretty mediocre in their first midterm in 2018, despite voters thinking the economy is good. The opinion has been very dark this time. It's, I think, camouflaged by how the Democratic Party's image is pretty terrible and people don't trust them to come in and fix it. How has the war changed that? It has been unpopular, and the president doesn't like to talk about it. I think we've talked about this before. What would Republicans like to message on this week? What are they talking about in their districts right now because they're on hiatus? It is tax refunds. They would love to talk about tax refunds and how they are benefiting people. That is crowded out by the war, and the White House is not messaging locally on how the war is going to be good for people. I think maybe they're not surprised that people are not passionate about continuing something that Trump didn't run on doing. But it is really seen, and I was in New Hampshire this week, and when I travel around, it is seen as unnecessary and driving up costs, and that's really it. Apart from one day when you saw Iranian Americans celebrating the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, no show of public support for this happening. Even at CPAC, it was a little bit of a push.
Well, that's interesting. What is also interesting is what you started with, which is that this has been true before the war. And one of the big reasons was Americans are very worried about health care. We were talking for a while at length before the new year about the subsidies for the ACA that was running out, not getting renewed, and how much it was going to cost Americans. You just heard that gentleman up top talking about trying to afford medical care for his mother. Here's a Gallup poll. Americans are skipping meals, just as that man said, and making other cuts to afford health care. Healthcare costs are rising. What does that mean to, I mean, you don't have to tell me, though, but what does it mean, Justin, for a daily budget if you are factoring in what it's going to cost to go to the doctor for a checkup, God forbid, factoring in what it's going to cost for treatment for an illness like cancer, or having to get an MRI to see how you're doing for some other potential condition. All of these things in the American healthcare system are expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, I wish you could come and teach my economics class, because the fact that what you want to do is take these abstract numbers and bring them back to the reality of people's lives. The stakes here are absolutely real. The president promised on day one he'd bring down the cost of living, but the Obamacare subsidies might cost a typical family $2,000 right there. He said he wouldn't get involved in any unnecessary foreign wars. Gas right now is $4 a gallon. These are very direct. Often there are deep questions. How does what happens in Washington affect me and my life? But when you're imposing tariffs on people, when you're starting foreign wars, and when you're not re-engaging with healthcare subsidies and the cost of living, you can draw a very direct line from abstract decisions in the White House to the very human difficulties people are feeling right now.